Well, I'm not surprised that the system did not want to record what I just said, so we're going to do this again. Okay, when I was thinking about my timeline, okay, um, and of course the system knows that I could, even though I don't record the same exact things that happen, exactly the same. I don't Xerox anything, and it knows that. This system knows this, that we're using as a communication system. It knows that I run the spin rate of my light. It can't keep up with it. So when it realizes that I'm sharing information about how your timeline works from the moment you come out of the womb, even before that, actually, it doesn't want you to know what I'm trying to share with you so that you could perceive it the way that it's presented, because if you did that, then you could begin to understand how everybody's timeline works as units of consciousness that exist within the field of the morphogenetic field structure that it had control over. Okay? Which is basically your AI, your plasma field AI. Okay? So here's a simple way to think of it. And so let's say, for instance, that I wanted to start off on a Monday because I was thinking about my timeline, about some events that I would have liked to have changed. Okay, so if I go back to 8 o'clock in the morning and say between 8 and 12 o'clock, I decide to go back and change 3 events that happened within those 4 hours. How could I go back in time, change those events without, how do I put it, getting to 1 o'clock, where every event that happens after 1 o'clock, I want to keep that intact? Well, the 3 events that you choose, say between 8 o'clock and 1 p.m. in the afternoon, are connected to everything else, which is every other unit of consciousness that is in all of the electrical potential between past, present, and future possibilities, all exists within the morphogenetic field structure. Because all the units of consciousness that are here within the morphogenetic field structure, we are all connected in consciousness. If I change any of those events between 8 and 12 because it's being communicated as a wave of communication between another unit of consciousness and myself, then the strip, much like an EKG strip, it starts saying the 8 o'clock in the morning, kickstart that strip. That strip is running Robert O. He's running 600 megahertz. Whoops, there it goes down to 100. What happened? There it goes back up to 600. There it goes down to 100. Back up to 600. Hey, now it's at 350. Now it's back up to 800. Now it's at 600. Now it's down to 100. Your timeline is just like an EKG strip, and it's recorded. And that's your coursework record. That's the Akashic record. Your entire film strip of everything that you experienced here, of things that you consciously chose and intended to experience, those things, every time you got a stimulus response signal to you from somebody else, okay, so for example, you're standing around 3 people, one person is running 800 megahertz, and you were experiencing 400, now you're experiencing 800 that they are sending a signal to, that will get registered on your record. Because your antenna will pick it up, and at the moment you pick it up and you become aware of 800 megahertz, then that 800 megahertz just went up, and on your EKG strip, in this case your timesheet, okay, for your identity, the core frequency identity that you are inside the morphogenetic field structure, that you're identified by as a unique individual, okay, coming in here, has a film strip, has a record. And that record is recorded on a strip that is represented by the waves that you're experiencing, okay? So 1 minute you could be outside time, next minute you're inside time, which means that the strip is running. The clock is running. Up, longer waves, high-speed waves, longer waves. It all depends on the stimulus, which means the incoming signal that you're experiencing in your bio-operating system, your biotech. And then, of course, the signals that you're generating that are your state of mind that's wanting to experience what it is you want to experience, because you're not being affected by any other signal input. So like, for example, when I'm out in nature, I'm experiencing an enormous amount of peace, love, harmony, and balance being in nature. So if you hook me up and you could see the time strip registering my output on the electromagnetic spectrum, When I'm in nature, you would see me running at a very high rate of speed on a consistent basis. From 1 minute to the next hour, to the next hour, to the next hour, to the next day, to the next day, to the next day, and the next day. But it depends on my geolocation. It depends on where I happen to be in the morphogenetic field structure in geometric space. Okay? I could be outside time, I could be inside time. Depends on the speed of the vibration. See? So when you're learning how to master your heart wheel and spinning your own Merkaba, you know how to run your own accelerator. Okay? But that also means that you can also be affected by, I decide to leave the forest, drive downtown, the next thing you know is I'm witnessing a murder out in front of a liquor store. Now all of a sudden, instead of my energy being up around 650 or 700 megahertz, now I went all the way down to, say, 60. Wow, from the event was so traumatic. Somebody was shot, bleeding half to death out in the parking lot, and I run over there to try and stop the bleeding. Now all of a sudden the cops show up, drawing guns, and the ambulance shows up. Chaos. See? So that's what firefighters experience, right? They could go from 1 minute being in a fire station in a state of peace, and the next thing you know, you got Hell's Half Acre on fire, like a gasoline tanker that's on fire on the Newport Freeway back in, when was that happened? 1971? When basically it's one of those chain reaction accidents where somebody hits the brakes where everybody's doing 60 miles an hour and all of a sudden traffic just comes to a screeching halt. So now all of a sudden you got all these cars that are traveling at 65 miles an hour. They don't have a whole lot of room to stop. And as a result of that, there was a tractor trailer with it was hauling gasoline, which was 2 tanks, which was, as I remember it, 5,000 gallons of gasoline that caught fire and ended up with 50 people running down the freeway when the engines got there. So people were running down the middle of the highway on fire. That's chaos. Imagine being in the middle of that and being in a state of peace in order to be able to manage that situation, to be able to operate effectively without falling apart. Right? So anyway, that gets recorded on your electromagnetic record. That's what we have, is an electromagnetic record, okay, of everything that we experienced on the event horizon that is recorded as to the speed of the wave. See, so this is how when you're here and you're giving more light instead of taking more light, that shows up on your strip. Okay, so that's the record that we have here while we're here. So when she talked about moving from 3D to 5D, that 5D is wanting to maintain. Imagine wherever you go, you're not experiencing anything less than 800 megahertz or higher. Imagine that. Everybody's in a state of love and joy. Everybody's free to do whatever they want to do. Imagine a world like that. Everybody's thriving like crazy. Can you imagine that? Right? Those places exist. Those are the heavenly realms that exist within our own heart wheel. And we can pull the film strip up and show the timeline. See? So, anyway, I wanted to share that because it's simple. It's much just like an EKG ship. Remember the old ticker tape parades? You know, the ticker tape on the stock market? They're keeping track of everything that's going up and down, everything that's going up and down. You can measure the ticker tape against the movement of electrons on the planet according to the timetables that were set up, the 7 seconds of darkness, which means we're always going to be running a deficit of electrons. Okay? You see what I'm saying? That's how they harvest all the electrons.